Welcome to VS Garage. I'm Brenda. Thank you for joining us in this season premiere of season 2 of Civic Duty. In this 2-part episode, we're going to be doing some long overdue engine maintenance, a timing belt change, and we're replacing the engine mounts because one of them popped in Yanceyville. If you didn't watch the video where we popped the engine mount rally crossing the Civic, you can go ahead and check that out as well. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to pass it on over to Steve, who's going to explain the first part of this episode, which is that timing belt change.
Okay, so timing belts, what are they? Why are they important? It turns out they're very important if you have a vehicle with a timing belt like this 1996 Civic DX with the D16 engine. A timing belt is basically what keeps your cams moving in time with the pistons in your engine. And that's important because as the engine operates, you have your piston moving up and down, and you have valves that let in air and fuel mixture, and then it explodes, and then it exhausts out an opposite valve. And so in order for all of that to work well, it needs to be perfectly in time, along with the spark. If you get out of time in an interference engine, like most engines are these days, you can actually have your piston strike one of your valves and you can break the valve. You can also punch a hole through the top of the piston. All those things are bad and it's extremely expensive, and we want to avoid it at all costs. So in this Civic, we actually don't know quite how many miles are on the engine. We think it's maybe around 130, maybe it's 150. Most timing belt services are between 100,000 miles and 110,000 miles. So we think that it's overdue and that we better go ahead and do this before we jump timing, which is where the camshaft skips over a tooth on the timing belt, or the timing belt breaks altogether. Brenda, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe we should just jump straight to a K swap.
You're right, we should swap in a K and fuck the D series entirely.
So coming over to the workbench, the different parts that we have for this job, one of the first things that we have to do is take the valve cover off. So we have a new valve cover gasket. We also have new seals for all of the spark plugs. Moving into the timing belt service itself, we of course have our timing belt. We have a tool specifically made for removing the crankshaft bolts off of these Honda engines. We have a new oil pump that came in the kit with the timing belt, so we're going to go ahead and swap that out too. And then finally, we have a water pump that also came in the kit with the timing belt, and we're going to swap that out while we're in there. So to do all of this, it's going to be quite a bit of work, but we think that when we're done, we've basically future-proofed this engine for the next million or so miles. It's not true, it's not that many miles.
The first challenge that we're going to have to tackle in our timing belt change is cracking the crank bolt, which is actually most accessible by removing the driver's side wheel and coming at it from the side. We don't have a splash guard, but normally we would also have to remove a splash guard at this point. After doing our research, it looks like if we can crack that crank bolt and get it started, the rest of the stuff should come off really easy, and it's just a matter of taking things out, replacing stuff, and putting it back together. After that, naturally, the valve cover itself is going to have to come off, so that's going to involve removing all of these leads. The timing belt cover is going to have to come off. This is our burst motor mount, and that's going to come out, but also what makes it a good time for us to replace it with an aftermarket performance one. The dipstick is going to have to come out. We're going to have to, fortunately we don't have a power steering pump in our version of this Civic. Normally that would have to move out of the way, but we have a ton of room because we have the barest of bones versions of this Civic. These belts are going to have to be slipped out of the way so that we can get access to stuff. We've got bolts here and here. These are what hold the timing belt cover on. Once we have the timing belt cover off, we'll have easy access to the cam gear, which will rotate to be in time and leave it there so that we don't accidentally put belts back on and leave the engine out of time and get all of those nasty consequences that Steve described. We'll also have access to our water pump, which you're not gonna see here very easily, but it lives sort of back here-ish. We're gonna crack the seal on that, get that out, spill coolant all over Steve's garage floor, and then we'll also get the oil pump, which we can't see right now, but it's down underneath here. So we've got our work cut out for us, and let's get started with getting the front wheels up and cracking that crank bolt. We have everything here that we should need to manually break this crank bolt free. We've got this fancy tool here, which fits into this hex space on the outside. You gotta sort of sneak it in there, but it does go, I promise, eventually. There it goes. And then once that's in there, we're going to use one breaker bar set against the floor to hold it in place. Click, boom, the floor should act as our little stopper there. And then we've got this nice long honking breaker bar and a nice long extension that is going to actually go onto the 17mm bolt that is the crank bolt. And we're using this jack stand as a fulcrum to hopefully help this come apart. I've seen this go very poorly for people on the internet, and I've seen it be really easy too. I'm hoping ours is super easy. So to break this loose, I should be able to go regular counterclockwise with this breaker bar, and then this one, again being held against the floor, should keep everything stable so that it comes loose. I should just need to pull down on this. Or I'm tightening it right now. I don't think I'm tightening it. Damn it! Not what we want. We need that to stay put. Now that I've added a block of wood to get it to stick. Block of wood, that's not a word. Block of wood to get it to stay put. I think this time it's gonna work. It's not. Oh.
You gotta put a lot more weight into that.
I'm scared. Okay. No. That can't be right. I must be doing this backwards.
Oh, something just popped. Look at how the whole engine rocks. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, that engine mount. Oh, there it goes.
Wow, that was loud.
That was so much effort.
Let's see if we can get it a little bit more. There we go.
All right, now that we've overcome the main obstacle in this job, breaking that crank bolt loose with Herculean pipe-assisted effort, we're gonna take the valve cover off, the timing belt cover off, and actually get to the internal workings of this engine. Ta-da! Okay, got my nice deep socket here. It's gonna take the spark plugs out. The reason why I'm taking the spark plugs out is because it's gonna be easier to rotate the crank to get it in time, which again, really important, because if we get it out of time with the crankshaft out of time with the camshaft, then all kinds of terrible stuff happens. Our spark plugs are still looking pretty healthy. We just changed them like maybe a few 100 miles ago, and it looks like they might be running a little bit rich, but all in all, this is your opportunity to check your spark plugs and then replace them if necessary. We're gonna keep using these. Now that we've got the valve cover and gasket off, and because I don't trust me at all doing this. I'm gonna cover all of this up so we don't get shit inside of the engine. And it protects her modesty. Next, I'm gonna take off the driver's side engine mount. This is your opportunity to check if yours is burst. Ours is burst, we know this. And it's also a great opportunity to swap it out if yours is burst. It seems to be pretty common for these fluid-filled engine mounts to burst. These are 17 millimeter and they are tough. All right, count it. This is trip number 1 to a hardware/parts store. We need a deep socket for these nuts on these studs here for the passenger side engine mount. So make sure you have a nice deep 17 millimeter socket before attempting to take that off, or you'll just be sad like me and have to interrupt your flow.
And we're back in the garage after a run to the unofficial sponsor of this and many other videos, Harbor Freight. We stopped in, we were like, Mr. Harbor, we need the right tools for this job. And he was like, well, I have a fantastic selection of very affordable tools that you can use for it. So we ended up with this 17 millimeter deep socket that we're gonna use to continue taking off the engine mount. So let's do that and hopefully not have to run to the store anymore. Okay, so we broke those nuts loose, and now we're going to go ahead and support the engine from underneath with a jack and a piece of wood on the jack. So we're just gonna put this underneath the oil pan and get it in place to support the engine without lifting it, so that we can continue to remove that engine mount. So this is the engine mount that we broke during our Yanceyville Rallycross experience. And yeah, after the race, we saw that there was just like oil and gummy stuff all over it. If we pull to this side, we can actually see there's a big crack right there. So what we're gonna do is replace this with a solid polyurethane engine mount, and that should prevent this from happening in the future.
Nice. Now that we have the engine mount off, we're going to move these belts out of the way. It just gives us freer access to everything, and again, it makes rotating everything into time easier. It's a 10 millimeter bolt for this tensioner down here, and that's gonna, well, take the tension off of the belt and make it easy to slip off the pulleys. To get the belt off the rest of the way, I have to remove this rubber isolator. You can see it if you come around here. This attaches to the engine down at the bottom. It's not holding it steady like these engine mounts are up at the top, but ours is still torn to bits and overdue for replacement. So we have replacements for both the left side and right side engine isolators, and we're gonna replace those after we pull them off. But first, the off part. This is...
Oh, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, this is something that's not doing its job anymore. We're gonna have to get the rest of it off, but the hard part's finished, because now I have all kinds of room to get this out. I'm popping the AC idler pulley off, and then I'm also gonna take the bracket off that goes with it.
Okay, with the upper timing cover out of the way, we're ready to work on the lower timing cover, but before we do that, we want to get the dipstick tube out of here. And so we're gonna try to do that without breaking or crimping it. They can get a little bit crusty and rusty, and well, let's just hope that it goes okay. Don't lose this clip. There we go. It's nice and oily and not rusty, so that's a win for us.
So I'm gonna put the engine in time while the belt and stuff's all attached. Before I do that, I'm going to break free the bolt here on the camshaft because it's gonna get knocked out of time when I yank on it anyway, so I should do that first.
Okay, so Brenda is going to go ahead and set the engine in time, remembering that these D16 engines actually rotate counterclockwise. So we're not running the engine backwards. This is the correct direction. There is a red mark on the sprocket already, and also the word up right here. And so we're gonna roughly align those, and then on the back of the cam sprocket are 2 more alignment spots that we'll check. And then also down here on the crank pulley are a few more spots that we can check for alignment. So that is roughly up right now, and then we're going to check down here, and we have our little mark on the timing cover, and then we want to set it to the 1. You don't want to use the 3, you want it to be set to the 1. So we got to go a little bit farther. Okay, and then we're going to come around to the back of the sprocket, and what we can see is that there are a few very small hash marks on the back of the sprocket. There's one on this side and there's one on the other side, and we want those to be flush with the deck. So we're looking pretty good from this side. So this is what a D16 engine looks like in time.
We're just in time. Now we're removing the harmonic balancer because that's covering up the remaining bolts that we need to get at to take the lower timing cover off.
All right, crank bolt is out.
Crank bolt out. How does it have a little hair on it? Huh.
Gross.
The harmonic balancer should pull right off. There's a little Woodruff key in here. Don't lose it. It's an itty bitty gray rectangle. And you know what color this floor is? Gray.
Blue?
It's gray.
All right, take the thing off.
Uh-oh.
Success?
Yeah, it came right off, but it came off way easier than I thought. I wasn't ready to catch it.
With the harmonic balancer out of the way, it's time to finish taking off that lower timing cover so we can finally get at the timing belt, water pump, and oil pump. I think we'll want to keep this gasket in case we have to reuse it.
Now with the lower timing cover off, we have easy access to all the other stuff that we're gonna have to remove to include obviously the belt, but before we do that, I'm gonna remove this crank sensor right here. And that just zips right off with a 10mm socket. Now the crank position sensor is out of the way, I'm going to remove my timing belt tensioner. Comes the timing belt. Ta-da! Old timing belt. And actually, our old timing belt, it actually looks like it's in really good shape. So probably whoever previously owned this thing did the scheduled maintenance on it. But that's okay, because we didn't know.
Thanks for joining us in part 1 of this video at BS Garage. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and ring the bell to catch part 2, and we'll see you next time.